Hey YouTube, hey viewers, and welcome back to another episode of Creating a Social Media API with me, Wayne. We've been doing loads recently. We're getting quite far into the series. I mean, there's still tons more to go, but hopefully you guys are really enjoying this and kind of understanding how Laravel works in a very basic term as it stands for now. I was just going to get it's going to get a lot more complicated. But for now, we're just sticking with the basics and just going through and then gradually grow through different strengths inside Laravel. So I sent you some homework in the last lesson, which was to have a look at this request that we were doing in our yesterday session. And I asked you to change this request to be a normal request that we did in one of the sessions beforehand. So I'm going to show you how to do that quickly. And then I'm going to show you a few other techniques that we're going to add into this register, because we're not finished yet. There's still a lot more to do to this to make it a lot more cleaner, but we still won't be finished because there's a little bit more to do in the next episode where we're going to look at a repository pattern. Like I've been saying, we're going to be doing this repository pattern, but I want to make sure you feel comfortable first before we even start doing that. So let's quickly do the homework. The best idea is to jump into your console and we're going to make a request. So PHP artisan make request. And we're going to just call this, no, it's not login, it's a register user request. Now remember, always put request at the end, it's just a lot more easier to understand. And this should make our request inside the application. Give it a minute. So there we go, we see it's been created successfully, which is perfect. And we're going to pop back into our code base. And we'll notice that we have inside our requests, we now have our register user request. And remember, we need to fill in some details here in regards to rules. Now, I just want to guide you to something that could be really valuable to you in the future when it comes to making these requests. If you haven't looked at the Laravel documentation yet, don't forget to make sure you either join or subscribe. Thank you very much. In the validation, in the Laravel docs, you can quite easily read this. Don't forget, all links are down below in the description. It actually gives you a whole list of validation rules that we can put inside these requests. And we can see there's quite a few of them. And we have been using them, well, a few of them in this test post controller. Remember, we use the string, required, min, and integers. You can see they're all here. So string is somewhere here. So there's string, here's integer, and there's a variety of them that we have. So what we need to do is inside this request, we need to make sure we get our form data. So we go back to our post span, and remember, we're just posting 3 fields: name, email, and password. So let's get those in. So we have name, and we're going to do something with name. The other one is email, and we're going to do something with email. And the other one is password, like so. Password, if I can spell, password, and there we go. And we're going to do something with password. So for name, obviously we're going to do the simple stuff, and that's just going to be, I don't know, just your normal things that we need, I guess. So we're going to make sure that this is required. So if we have a look inside the docs, we can see that required is something that we need. So here you go. So required is one of the options. And we can just keep going through the list. My alt tab is being a little bit awkward. So we'll just keep this required, and we'll just make sure that we have a minimum of 2 characters in this instance. This one here, we can do the same. So email. It'll be interesting to see if we've actually got a validation rule for email. So let's have a look inside the docs. Oh my goodness, what is going on here, Wayne? You're struggling with the keys today. Let's have a look. Is there anything for email? Let's have a look through the list. And yes, we do. We've actually got this email here. And we could put an email validator in if you want. And obviously we can use this prefix, but we'll just leave this for now, just as a little bit more easier, but we'll just make sure it's required. We could also make sure that it's unique, which is pretty interesting. So unique is going to check, and we can check inside the docs again. If we scroll back all the way to the top again, let's look for something called unique. And basically it's saying, okay, am I unique to my database? So for example, a good example here is saying, is my email unique to my users table under the thing called email address? So we could do that. If we look just below here, we can do the same thing again. So if we just copy this and paste it in here. So we're going to say, okay, it's unique to users and email address. Database, just check. Is it called email address? No. So this will throw an error. We need to make sure that we call it email. Like so, email. And then password is obviously going to be required. Now I'm going to show you something cool about this, is that with password, we could add another feature in here. So if we scroll back up to that list again, a massive list, just going to keep scrolling. We should see something called password. So we can see that we have this must match an authentication user password. Okay. But there's also another very interesting one. I'm not going to really worry about this one, but we could use, I'll try and see if I can find in this list. Here you go, confirmed. So confirmed is quite interesting as a unique piece. Confirmed is going to actually make sure that we can pass in two values. So if we're registering a user, for example, you'll have inside the field boxes name, email, password, and confirm password. That way, when we do a confirmation, we don't have to write any code. We can just get the validation to check that for us. So we're actually going to add this in because it is quite handy to have. So we're going to add confirmed in. I spelled that completely wrong, so I'm actually just going to copy this. Excuse me. And that's pretty much it. So we have name, email, and password. So we make sure name is longer than 2 and it's required. Email is required, but it must be unique to our users table under the email column. And password is required, but it also needs to be confirmed. And we need to make sure this is set to true. Always make sure it's set to true. We're going to go back into our cool little controller. So here's our auth controller, and we're going to import that in. So we remember called it register user request. And you can see it automatically imports. Let's just make it look neat. And now you can see we don't have a need for this because it's not needed now because we made our own little request functionality. And let's give this a spin quickly. So let's go into Postman and send in this request. Same request as we were doing previously, but you'll notice we get a few errors now. These are nice and handy for the end user, or sorry, for our front end guys. So here we can see there's an error list of things that aren't correct. So first we got email has already been taken. Now remember we got that really horrible response back with showing our database structure. You don't really want to do that. So showing these is a lot more sufficient. So here we're saying the email has already been taken. So okay, we know that. So let's call it bob4@bob.com. So now it says, okay, well, the password confirmation does not match. So obviously I'm going to have to add something here, but what do we put? Well, it's very simple. We just go back to the docs and you can see it's looking for this form field here. Now it needs to be exactly the same as this field. So password confirmation. And we're going to pass in password 1 and hit send. And this now should actually get us a user and add us in now. So because everything is correct. We've got Wayne, these, and also now we're checking against each one of these passwords. Check our database and we should see that Bob4 has now been added in. Our password has been hashed and we can see when he was created. Pretty cool, right? So that was your homework. This session, I'm going to show you how to actually return the right data back to the end user. So this is okay, but we're missing things. Like for example, inside our code here, we have this token, but we don't see this token when we created the user. It doesn't exist. So we're going to add that in. And also the data structure isn't very nice here. This is not how we would send something back to any of our front-end developers because it's just a little bit messy. And if they had to try to search through this, it's a little bit more difficult for them. So how do we make their life easier? Well, on our return back that we send back, we don't just send back user. We kind of got to structure it in a nice way so that when front-end users or front-end developers are using our endpoints, they can gather the data quite easily. And we can do this very simply by using some Laravel functionality. So what we'll do is we're going to return a response. So this is just a generic response coming back. However, I want the response to be in a JSON format. This is very important. A lot of things nowadays use JSON, and we also know, remember in our headers, we're using JSON here. So why not send our response back as JSON? I don't really like the way how people just normally send back responses that are not JSON. It's just a personal preference. You could just send in a response if you want to. I have no worries with that. You'll just do the same way as I'm doing with inside the JSON string. Again, that's up to you. So inside here, you're going to put in an array, and we're just going to make an empty space. And how I would normally do this is I'm going to pass in a data parameter or data string. And in here, I'm going to create a whole new array. Okay, so I'm sending an array back with data as my header. So if I was a front-end developer, I could pick off data. And then I'm going to have two things just for this example. One called success. Okay, and that success is going to tell me whether it's going to be true or false. So in this case, if we've created this user, it's going to be true. I'm quite happy with that. And then after that, I'm going to pass in my data. Okay, so I could have user, for example, and then pass in user like that. So let's see what happens if we run this now. So let's go into our Postman. Remember, we're going to have to change a bit of our body here because it's going to shout at us. But if we just change this to Bob5 and send this, you'll notice it looks a lot more neater. So we have our data structure with a success message of true. So now our front-end guys will say, okay, this is a successful operation. I mean, even though we get a 200, so you can see here the status is 200, they also use that too. But I feel it's just a little bit more cleaner if we send a success message through. And then we've got our user here. Perfect. I'm quite happy with that. However, there's a bit more that we're missing. We are missing the token. So we can just add that in. So let's duplicate that line and just call this token. And we're going to pass in this token here. Now, if we send off the response, hit send. Oops, our email is taken. Let's change that again and hit send. There we go. So we have our success of true. Our user has been created and our token has now been generated for that user. Pretty cool, right? So now we've got access to pretty much everything in regards to our user. Remember, in regards to this token that we make in, this token is if they just register and we log them in straight away. We could use that token. In our future tutorials, which you'll see, which will happen, we can actually take this token away. I was only doing this to show you how to create tokens. We're going to take this away and send them like a unique code that's going to go to their email. They'll click on the email link and then it'll activate the user and then we register their token that way. But I'm just showing you how we can actually generate these tokens under the user. So now this looks a lot more cleaner. And this is what the plan was for this session, is that we're going to introduce this new password confirmation with password 1. And we're making sure that the data that we return back to our endpoints is a lot more cleaner so people could read it. So in this case, name, email, updated at, created at, and ID. Let's just, because I think we've got a bit of extra time, let me just check. So we've been going for, I'm not too sure, 12 minutes. So we've got a bit extra time. So let's clean this up a little bit. So let's say I don't want to send this ID through. Okay. So let's go and have a look. So let's go into our project and remember we're using this user model. So if we go into the user model, remember we have this thing called fillable, name, email, and password. And we've got some hidden things. So password and remember token. If I had to pass into the hidden fields of ID in this instance, now remember this inside our user model, save it, and let's run this again. So let's add another user again. We're gonna have so many Bobs in our database. But you'll notice that now ID has been removed from our set of data that we're passing in with inside the user. Again, we can do a little change as well. If we want to take password out, we'll put it back in a second. But if we take password out and make another user, so Bob8, and send that, you'll notice we now have a password that's now visible inside the user model. Now, this is exactly why we don't have that password in there, because we don't want to share that really. We want to keep that to ourselves. So you wouldn't really have that. So this is why we keep it hidden. And this will happen to a variety of things with whatever you have inside your database. So you could hide specific fields in your model. This fillable will become very important later on, and we'll see that. So that's pretty much it for this session. We've managed to create our user, our token, our nice little response. We've managed to make our request, so our register user request, which we've made some rules. So it needs to be a minimum of 2. Our email is required and it needs to be unique to the table, i.e. users with the email address. This could be unique to any if you want to refer to any table, as long as you give it the plural. And you want to make sure that the password is required and also confirmed. And remember, if you're having this confirmed bit on your request, you need to make sure that you have password confirmation inside your body form data with the same password value. In this case, password 1, password 1. And then what we did is we used all that to create this nice little successful JSON response. Oops. And basically we just called the data and we plugged in some information. So in this case, true, a user, and a token. And we get this nice little output. I want to thank again for you guys joining me for this session. I hope you guys are really enjoying them. I'm getting some good feedback and I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Remember, this is going to be a very long series. The idea was because obviously I do game dev tutorials. I'm thinking about making a social game, whereas you'll be able to use all these login credentials that we've got. And all the data strings that we're going to be doing inside the social network, but it will be in a 3D environment inside a game. So this is the reason behind this. And also, if you want to learn how to build an API, that's cool too. So if you really enjoyed this session, thank you for joining me. Hopefully, if you really enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you really liked, hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell if you want to be notified. And also just a reminder, we've got a Discord channel just here on the channel. If you want to join that, it's also in the description below. It's been great taking you. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.